of the artificial system as Janus face. Janus means facing both ways at once. Even multifaceted, where the configuration of the artifact or system must be at least doubly adjusted, at once to the subject and at once to the worlds it operates. This is crucial, absolutely crucial. The only way things work for us. We can do it by this crude little diagram. That the artifact or the system must have interacting relationships between the outer worlds, and my spelling has gone on here, sorry, the environment, and interacting relationships with the world of the subjects. So this is the kind of, so that the configuration is this double echo. Let's talk about this a bit because it's extremely important. The adjustment is in fact the design of the configuration, which must somehow relate to the worlds of the subject and must somehow relate, shall we say, to the world of the object, the outer worlds, the environment which is made there. Now we can understand this in principle, but let's try and look at an example because we also need to try to think a little bit more concretely how does subject get into configuration, how does outer world get into configuration. I'm going to give you a key example, which is a favourite object of mine, and I do apologise, I let my actual physical objects, which I was going to give you to hold and play with at home, so I do apologise, you've only got pictures. I'm going to give you a little example of a vegetable peeler using a design entrepreneur called Larry Keeley, who is a commercial designer, entrepreneur of successful products. And he's talking about how to make successful products, commercially successful, but successful also because they connect with people. And in this very throwaway line, in this otherwise entirely sort of business-like talk, I suddenly realized he'd given a theory of design beyond, I think, what he intended, but I think it's brilliant theory of design. He says this. Now, things are like products or messages or information systems. They come equipped with features and capabilities, and human beings, my favorite species, come equipped with their own set of capabilities, and the important thing is to find a resonant connection between them. It says, this is where, the next few minutes is where I give you the takeaway to become very, very rich indeed. Jamie gave you a nice design takeaway. Mine will make it. I promise. When you understand this, Keeley says, you're able to connect things and people in richer, better, and more resonant ways. Now look at what Keeley's done here. Look at this. Look at that term, features and capabilities. What I suddenly realized down here. He's talking about product resonance. The multiple reciprocity that occurs when, through its configuration, something or some system is exceptionally well attuned to the subjects who will use it and to the tasks it will perform. So we pick up a perfectly balanced tool, it fits in our hand, it works perfectly for what we want to do. There's a kind of reciprocity and resonance here. How? And there's Keeley giving us the clue. People have features and capabilities, tools have features and capabilities. Let's use a simple example of a tool. The task has features and capabilities. Can we put these together? The answer is yes, of course we can. But what the configuration does, the features of the configuration, features and capabilities of the configuration must be made to echo in some way features and capabilities of subject, features and capabilities of task. This is the crucial thing. So what Keeley is saying to us is given precise content to this statement. Meaning that a truly successful product or system, product system, will embody in its inner configuration, in its features and capabilities, the features and capabilities of both of the worlds that it mediates, meaning subjects and tasks. The outer world of the task it deals with, and the world of the subject. Now this is complicated, and in fact, we need to make this formulation much more complicated than it is, unfortunately, but you begin to get what we mean here. Features and capabilities in the configuration, features and capabilities in the subject task. Here's Keely's example. These great little peelers. I use one almost every day, so to be a salesman. That were designed, as he puts it, to be optimal for people who have arthritis. He says, Tucker Byminster and his colleagues at Smart Design revolutionized the world of low-cost kitchen utensils in a case they did for Oxo called Good Grips. Most of you are probably owners of Good Grips, the terrific little peelers originally designed to be optimal for people who have arthritis. Let me give you the full background, which Keely doesn't here. The background to the invention of these little guys was a retired entrepreneur called Sam Farber. Farber started a couple of companies, retired with his wife. They loved to cook. His wife had very severe arthritis. She found a problem using nearly all the kitchen utensils they had. Farber wanted her to be able to continue cooking while they retired. He also liked to cook. He was aware of this problem of handling, and he went to Smart Design, and he offered Smart Design a deal, which was a percentage cut in the Oxo Good Grips. He sold them on the idea of the possibility of creating a set of kitchen tools, beginning with a peeler, that would not only be comfortable to use, they'd be actually kind of really pleasant to use. What his wife found difficult was with what we might call the ubiquitous potato peeler, the one you can buy anything from $2.99 in a cheap store through to kind of $9.99. This is if you want it in posh stainless steel, but basically that's the one that you might call it the student, potato peeler. Had them for years at home until I got an Oxford. There are other possible solutions to the problem. Sam Farber and his wife. One solution which is used is supermarkets that sell ready peeled vegetables, which they do now, delis and supermarkets. And I had a researcher in Portugal, and she was dealing with patients with stroke problems, and all elderly, poor patients, and they just love ready peeled vegetables in a bag. But you can't always get ready peeled vegetables in a bag, and sometimes you actually do want to cook. So Farber went to Smart Design, and they began to think about what it meant to actually use something, to use a tool, and they researched. They thought about the hand. They thought about the materials. What would be? They worked with plastics, obviously, but eventually came up with a kind of silky rubber. How many of you have got or used Good Grips? Well, quite a few. And then they came up with their best invention of this, which are these little fins here, and which you can squeeze, depending on how much pressure. So if you're in a real bad mood peeling potatoes, you can squeeze. Other times, if you're feeling kind of genuine, I'm not kidding either. I'm not kidding. These are brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Got big fat rubber handles, Keely says, with little flanges where your thumb and forefinger will touch, so they're easy to grip and hold, even if you're peeling carrots under the water. It's this idea that you can modulate. You can do anything from caress to savage. Now, I've always thought this myself. I love these things. As I was playing through trying to find the right kind of slide yesterday, I came across this woman's website, which is like a housewife's blog, and I found this. This is how good they are. This is a testimonial. Let me tell you, I love this. For many years we went without mashed potatoes. I peeled carrots, cucumbers, whatever other victuals needed to be peeled, unless Jeff was willing to do it, because I detest the job. I used to look like an actress in one of those hokey kitchen appliance infomercials when she would totally freak out and be bested by a spaghetti strainer or what have you. Vegetables would fly out of my hand and I'd peel off fingernails or worse parts of my fingers. Truly, I did not enjoy peeling vegetables. Verily, the job vexed me. This woman can laugh. Then she says, but one day, Jeff's mom gifted us with an OXO Good Grips potato peeler after watching me battle potato, and it has been a godsend. Seriously, this thing does all the work for you. It hums in your hand and massages your toes. What more do you want? And it magically removes with almost no effort at all the peels from even the misshapen potato. This was not on the OXO blog, this was just, I just found this, it's fantastic. I love this thing. I send posthumous praise to Ma every time I use it. I know what you mean. Jeff lives on potatoes, eating them almost every day, so this truly was a blessing. Did it work? I talked to Sam Farber in the early 90s. He invested $750,000, which he had saved up from his other entrepreneur. They developed the potato peeler, and they sold it to what is now Good Grips in 3 years for $49 million. Good. Entirely and utterly design-led innovation and configuration. All right? There you go. That's how to make it. Now, more than 300 products in their range. Lost a bit of their edge. A pair of scissors the other day that practically fell apart. But very successful. A daft example in a way, a silly little example, but it makes the point about mediation. And it makes the point about attunement. We can apply this from this little example to much more sensitive systems. One point about the design geniuses here is basically a form of adaptation. There are alternatives in the market. It's the design, sheer design skill of smart design is the capacity to translate perception into materials, to find the right kind of silky rubber for the handle that is extremely nice to use. It doesn't get unpleasant when it's wet and so on and so forth. It's just always pleasant to kind of hold. Things like that. Finding the right kind of blade. Too, they did loads of research. But also this, what Peter Drucker, when Peter Drucker, who is a management writer on innovation, has a couple of really great definitions as to what must be for good innovation. So it's not enough for the need to be felt. One that must be understood so that one can define the specifications of it, get very exact understanding. And secondly, the solution must fit the way people want to undertake the key activity. And so how they want to do it. You are always involved in a kind of desiring relation. Now let's see if we can pull, and I think that's key. So there's how to innovate successfully. Let's look at some theoretical implications out of this. The first one we can pull out of is that attunement of this kind, mediation, attunement, really means relations. What is principally shaped and attuned is not in a way the thing itself, but the relations that a thing has with a variety of contexts within which it operates. So we really talking about attuning relations. So design is in this sense an inherently relational activity, and I think we're now beginning to understand this. Where the 20th century is very much kind of focused that inwards on the object, inner relations almost. Now we're understanding the outer relation, that this is what we're really designing, and I think the future important design lies here. Secondly, this whole notion of negotiation of incommensurability. First of all, the idea of the active work of design in effecting attunement, which is negotiation with context. It's not will, it's not imposing will, it's negotiation with. Constant negotiation with hand realizes a kind of design. So this notion is extremely important. If design is an act of deploying negotiation, recognition and mediation to the act of attuning things in their context, this differentiates sharply from technology, this is very bad. part of this, the important word perhaps in there is recognition of what is to be negotiated with. And in fact we could say that what design does is that it identifies and gives active weight to the diversity of elements and requirements to which the work is addressed. It recognizes them and endows them with a capacity to be incommensurable, that is to say, to be negotiated with. So what design does in the problem, it identifies the factors which says these must be given weight, these must be negotiated with, they can't be eliminated, they can't be dominated, they can't be repressed, they must in some ways be negotiated with. And we could say that design success is precisely that it actually welcomes this, that's kind of design task. The signal capacity of design, I say to you, is to bring the unrecognized to the table, to give recognition to these conditions, to those persons who should be negotiated with as part of the design process. This is what I call a kind of expanded design process now, where we're talking about this negotiation with incommensurable requirements, but giving people way to be, or things, or factors, way to be negotiated. So whereas technology erases incommensurability, it has to, design celebrates it and uses it as the starting point for creative work. Design understands that incommensurability is not something that can or should be wished away, that requirements, elements, forces, demands, persons have to be negotiated, that means negotiated with, and the point of the process is to find ways not only of successfully doing this, but in the final result of celebrating this fact. So the notion of, in a way, design is the celebration of this negotiation. Third point here, subject-object mediation. Adorno, in one of his last major philosophical works, has a beautiful proposition. He says this. It's a proposition that nobody ever understands at first, but it's actually much simpler than it sounds. Mediation of the object means that it must not be statically, dogmatically, hypostatized, but can be only be known as it entwines with subjectivity. Mediation of the subject means that without the moment of objectivity, it would be literally nil. Translation. Adorno says, you can't think about objects in absence of the subjects because they only exist in relationship to subjects. Subjects thought without a moment of objectivity would be nil, they wouldn't exist. This is obvious, yet it requires to be said, certainly to philosophy. We can point out, however, whereas Adorno proposes this as a theoretical proposition, design lives this mediation. It is the delicacy of this mediation that distinguishes design, and in that sense design stands at the opposite end of those systems of representation where subject is opposed to object. So I'm saying that design lives subject-object mediation. Let's now turn at the end of the lecture to the third condition. This is where I have to slip out of this speech. Two conflicting PowerPoint systems. Okay, so second fundamental quality of the artificial. Things could be other. Now, that things could be other is probably the most obvious aspect of the artificial that we are dealing with. Yet just because, in a sense, it's obvious, we don't really think about it. It is, though, why the artificial is opposed to the natural. We think about natural things in there as fixed, as given, even if we know they're evolving, even if we know they're in motion, even if we know the universe is running down, nonetheless, for our experience of things. Natural things are given, they exist beyond us, whereas here we are only transient, emphatically only transient. This is a kind of issue in a way. It's why I think that religions are contemptuous of things as well as science. And partly inversely, perhaps, why we value what survives as artifacts. I mean, the Metropolitan Museum is really a vast storehouse of that which has survived in spite of destruction. And it's often very, very moving because of it. But that things could be other is an essential and not just incidental condition of the artificial, and Simon Lowes already told us why. We can in fact say the strongest thing is that artificial things have an incapacity not to be transformable. In other words, there are no artificial things virtually which you cannot transform. So if natural things have about them always an air of necessity, and we have to work artificially hard to make them contingent, as in breeding plants and animals. For example, the constant attempt to do the impossible, which is to breed black tulips. You can't. It's an impossibility. People try and get as near as they can. Or we have to work artificially hard at giving artificial things the qualities of natural things. We have to venerate them so that we pretend they are eternal. Constitutions, popes, kings and queens. Here is my own dear queen, riding back into the palace. I see two things here that we have to actually, we're constantly kind of playing between these two things. But we're looking at how things could be other, and the ambiguities of this are really intense. Because on the one side we genuinely do have, it's not as simple as artifice and flux, because very often our tight social, socio-cultural, psychological, political and economic relationships between the form of an artifact or a system and the system that it lives within and enables. There are artifacts that we want to hold on to. Think how